Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to MTG Mystics. My name is Steven.
And I'm Nick.
And today we're going to be doing just a little bit of a review of where we're at in the current limited format, March of the Machine. I've been playing too much of it, and Nick has played a decent amount at this point.
Yeah, actually, this is the first set where I've really been like on arena grinding drafts because honestly, okay, I'm going to expose myself a little bit here. I have never drafted on arena until this set because we've been doing the podcast and I was like, well, Steven can't do all the talking, right? So I'm going to grind some drafts. I think I've done 5 or 6 at this point, and I had a nice 7-1 deck, so that was good. A lot of 1-3s out there, but yeah, no, I've been grinding it quite a bit, and I've been having a blast. So
yeah, to be fair, I only started drafting in arena during Dominaria Dominaria United.
Oh, okay.
Because like I was just doing the paper drafts here at the Metagaming, every week. But I figured around that time that I wanted to try to get better and get more practice in. And so we have a bunch of stuff to talk about with the format today. But before we get into that, a reminder that this podcast is brought to you by the Metagaming in St. James, New York. We have all sorts of Magic events going on all week. Pioneer on Thursdays, Draft on Sundays, Modern on Saturdays. And we have all of the product that you could need. You need just a couple of supplies, deck boxes, sleeves, binders, all that fun stuff, sealed product. You want to just open an entire box like a madman? You can. I can't stop you. If you want to purchase those things online, use the code POD5P at checkout to get 5% off your order. All right, so we're going to start off actually with a crack-a-pack today. We're going to look at just a pack of March of the Machine, talk briefly about all the cards in it, just kind of give us an idea of where we're at in the format, what cards we like, what colors we like. This is actually a pack that I had opened pick 1 in an arena draft earlier today. So you'll get to hear about what decision I made as well. So let's start us off with Serpent's Blade Assailant. 2 and a green for a 2/1. Gosh, I cannot read this.
Elf Warrior.
There we go. With backup 1 and Death Touch. Nick, do you like this card?
Yeah, we were talking about this one earlier. I think it's okay, but in this format, honestly, I think it just doesn't do enough to actually be useful. I think something maybe we'll talk about a little bit more today is that backup hasn't performed like we kind of wanted it to. So this one falls kind of flat for me. Definitely not looking to first pick it.
I think the tough thing with this card is that it's not great at helping you force through damage. Like a couple of the good backup cards are the ones that say, like, you're not blocking me this turn, right? Bola Slinger being the big one. This one does give your creature, the 1/1 counter Death Touch, but that's not necessarily the end of the world. Your opponent does still have the option to block the thing. And so if you try to just play this, if you play it as an aggressive creature, it's going to unperform. If you go play it as a defensive creature, you're going to find that a lot of the aggressive white decks are just going to use those Bola Slingers to get past you, and or are going to put big flyers in the air that you can't deal with this thing. So I still play one every once in a while, but it's not where I want to be in the format.
Yeah, me neither. So next up, we've got Chomping Kavu, 3 and a green for a beast.
That's a Kavu.
God, we both suck at this. It's small over there, okay? I figured, what the hell is a Kavu? Anyway, it's a 3/3 with backup 1, and its effect is this creature can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less.
I do like this better than the Serpent Blade Assailant.
Me too.
It's still not a high pick or anything. Like, I wouldn't be caught dead first picking one out of a pack, but I'll play 1 or 2 in certain decks.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up, we have Thrashing Frontliner. 1 and a red for a 2/2 Viashino Warrior, I believe.
Phyrexian Viashino.
Oh, Phyrexian Viashino. Gosh.
Oh, this is awesome.
We're trying our
darndest.
love this. It's a 2/2 trample that gets +1/+1 whenever it attacks a battle. It's fine.
Yeah, we've kind of, I think we've come to the conclusion that red is pretty rough in this format.
Yeah,
It's
red's definitely a little bit weaker. That said, this is a totally fine run-of-the-mill 2-drop if you need them. There are better options, but 2-drops are still important in this format. This format's a little bit slower than normal, but that said, there's a lot of Convoke, and sometimes the best way to get Convoke online is to just have a creature out,
Right, definitely. And speaking of Convoke, this next one, Shatter the Source. 5 in a red instant Convoke. Choose one. Shatter the Source deals 6 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or battle, or destroy target artifact. I mean, that's kind of a sweet effect. Like 6 damage is a lot, and you're definitely not paying 6 mana for this.
Yeah, this set has a lot of removal is the main thing. And so I'm really hoping that most of my removal is better than this. Even
Yeah.
if you're not paying 6 mana for it, you're still paying more mana than you probably want to. There's just a lot of more efficient removal in the set. That said, I do usually end up playing one of them in red decks. If I'm lucky, then I end up with something better. I'll talk about a deck that I succeeded with this week that had much better removal than this, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Nick, I'm going to ask you to read the next card.
Yeah, this because you can't see it.
Not at all.
This one's Traumatic Revelation, 1 and a black for a sorcery. Choose, target opponent. I read it verbatim before without barely seeing it. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a creature or battle from it. If you do, that player discards that card. If you don't, you incubate 3.
Yeah, this card I would play one of in most black decks at this point. It's weird. This is the kind of effect that you usually don't want in limited, because targeted discard is hard to make worth it when the best card you're taking from most limited players is going to be like a 3/3 with upside or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But this set is very bomb heavy, and so you're often going to be able to snipe something that's worth a lot more. And having the fail case of incubating is actually quite nice. You can't fill your deck full of them, but it's good, right? You like it?
No, I like this card. I've cast a couple of them. I think the worst or the saddest Traumatic Revelation I've ever cast in this format so far was on the play. I cast it into a guy who dropped he dropped 1 planes, like nothing had even happened yet, and he shows me his hand. It goes Wrath, the Night Lord, the Zalfirin guy, and Elspeth. And I was like, well, can't grab the Elspeth. I think I wound up grabbing the Wrath in that situation, but that was a pretty rough one. But no, the card's definitely good. If his bomb was like a creature, not Elspeth, I would have not been talking about this right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like this card. Definitely not first picking it.
Oh.
But yeah.
Next up, we have Moment of Truth, 1 in a blue for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, 1 in your graveyard, and 1 on the bottom. It's a 23rd card, mostly, I think. This set doesn't really have like the blue-red spells matter so much as it has blue-red Convoke, obviously. You can get a little bit out of blue-white when you end up with the Wrath, but like it's good card selection. It replaces itself. Filling the bin is on very rare occasions relevant in this format.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do as much as I want to be doing on turn 2. And if you want card advantage, there's much better options for card advantage in this format.
Absolutely. That being said, there is a lot of like 2 mana instant speed interaction.
Sure.
In this format that just like holding like a couple things up. Like I had a game the other day where I had this Assimilate Essence and like the counter spell at 2 mana all in hand at the same time, and it was like I feel like God right now. I have so many choices. That being said, not first picking it. How about this one? Swordsworn Cavalier. It's 1 and a white. It's a common. These have all been common so far. Human Knight, 3/1, and it has first strike as long as a knight entered the battlefield under your control this turn.
It's the strongest card in the pack so far, I think.
Agreed.
It's still not a card I want to first pick by any stretch of the imagination, but it's good in one of the better decks in the format, the White Blue Knights deck. And if I see this on turn 2 across the field from me, I'm usually a little bit afraid. That means they're getting a good aggro start, and I need to make sure that I can actually effectively answer what they're doing.
Yeah, this thing can definitely deal a lot of damage before they have a blocker that can even think about blocking it. So
yeah, it's rough
yeah. So what do you think so far we're first picking this?
so far, but
Yeah, but of course, we have uncommons on the
there
way.
will be better cards for sure. But
This is a weird one. Oh, you know what? Why don't you read
I'll do it.
You're right.
Golden Scale Aeronaut is 4 and a white for a 2/3 dwarf pilot with backup 1 and flying. It's a playable card.
I keep picking it. I keep picking this thing. I like it. I don't think it's good, but I just like. I had a deck the other day with Yargle and Multani and something else stupid and big, and I was like, what if I just put it in the air one turn? What would they do? You know what they do? They Deadly Derision the card that's coming at them because everybody's got one. It feels like.
Yeah, there's a lot of removal in this set.
Yeah, he's okay. Even a 5-mana 3/4 flying with the backup one onto itself is reasonable, but like I think you were saying before, it's like more of a 23rd card ish. So
yeah, I'm not excited about it.
Me neither. So next up we got Tangled Skyline. It's 4 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life and incubate 5.
Yep.
Phyrexians you control have reach. So this card is sweet.
This is the new first pick out of the pack. This card just does so much for you. It stabilizes you. Like really hard. 5 life is a decent chunk. Giving all your Phyrexians reach means it deals with all the dumb preening champions and stuff that are probably in the air, assuming you have any other Phyrexians, which is not hard to do. And the Incubate 5 is just a lot, and it's not hard to make that 5 power incubator creature really a hassle for your opponent to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely like Tangled Skyline. I've played my fair share of them so far. And I mean, just the fact that it gains you 5 life when it enters it just really helps to stabilize you, and it just leaves you with a 5/5. Like, really, really good card. Copperhost Crusher is up next. It is 6 green for a Phyrexian Bear Rhino at uncommon. It's an 8/8 with trample and hexproof.
I haven't played this card.
Me neither. You don't see hexproof on a lot of cards these days, just straight up hexproof. So that you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. And green definitely has a ramp deck in this format, but like the ramp usually is able to make other colors. So just like play your whatever off-color bombs you have instead of this. It'll probably be better off.
This set is very bomb heavy, so it's very easy to end up with some kind of 7 mana plus really strong finisher if you want it. And so this is really a backup kind of win con for those sort of decks, and it's meaningfully worse enough than most of those cards where I really don't want to play it if I don't have to.
Yeah, you know what? This is actually a situation where the Assailant's really good because they have an Assailant on their board, and I play this. It's like,
I mean,
like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, I don't think I'm supposed to curse. Bleep that out.
Good job.
Yeah, we're not picking this guy, though. We don't like him.
Nezumi Freewheeler. 3 and a black for a 3/3 Rat Samurai at uncommon. It's got Menace. When it enters the battlefield, each player mills 3 cards. And for 3 and a Phyrexian white, you can transform it into a card whose name I don't remember because I didn't put it on the screen. I do know that when it transforms, it reanimates a permanent that costs 2 or less. And I believe it turns into a 4/4 Menace.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe a 4/5. I know we don't have it in front of us right now. This guy, I mean, listen, we don't have to talk about him that much. I don't think this guy's very good.
Yeah, it
looked cool in previews, but then it just hasn't been playing out the way we want it to.
It's just not enough stats on the front side to really matter. And it's super telegraphed when you go to the backside. And even when you do, it's hard to get a 2 mana permanent that's worth it. I have seen someone ramp by using the ability before after milling a land.
Oh,
which is interesting. I still don't think it's good.
No, me neither.
I generally like my ramp cards to cost less than 7 and a white Phyrexian. Yeah, but
me too.
It's an option.
All right, next up out of the pack, we've got Invasion of Belanon. This is our battle. It's 2 and a white. It's got 5 defense, and when it enters, you make a 2/2 white knight with vigilance. Okay, and then after you get rid of those 5 defense counters, it flips into an anthem effect. It's an enchantment.
Belanon War Anthem, I believe it's called.
Yeah, can't see the rest of that. Our setup's so funny. And it just gives, thank you. Belanon War Anthem gives creatures control +1/+1.
This card's overplayed.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, at pre-release, playing against this was a nightmare because I was in black-red, and it's just like, well, I don't have anything that can really deal with enchantments. But even still, like, definitely too many people are playing Invasion of Belanon. It's fun, and like the allure of an anthem is really enticing, but like 5 is just so much for that.
What I often find is that the decks that want the front side don't actually want the front side, right? A 2/2 with Vigilance for 3 is just not a really good rate. And those decks would rather not spend their time attacking a battle. They'd rather spend their time attacking you.
Right.
The decks that are good at flipping this battle don't necessarily want to put that much work in for an Anthem and don't really want to play a 2/2 for 3 at all. So I think it's overplayed. I think that the kind of decks that play it have much better options in that slot.
Me too.
I'm going to go ahead to the regular rare
Sounds good.
on this one. Rampaging Raptor, 2 red for a 4/4 dinosaur with trample and haste. For 2 in a red, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may have it deal that much damage to a battle or planeswalker, I believe, that an opponent controls as well.
Yeah, this card's sweet.
I've played with it a couple of times now. It's, I don't think a complete bomb or anything. Like, it's probably like a B plus A minus kind of thing. Your opponent does generally notice it and be like, oh, that's a problem. But it's a problem on turn 4. It's not a problem on turn 7 or something like that. It doesn't defend you particularly well. It's still, like, so far the first pick out of this pack, even though it is in red.
Yeah, I think so too. This card just, it's got good stats overall. And it's just a big fast beater. But I think that we're probably going to take the last card out of this pack. That is our companion baby, Yorion Sky Nomad. 3 and then 2 white-blue hybrid symbols for a legendary creature, Bird Serpent. And look at that art. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a 4/5 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. And special part about Yorion, plus the other 9 of them, it has Companion. It's one of the 10 companions in the set, all the way back from Ikoria, and each of them has a stipulation to put it in your deck. You need to meet a certain requirement.
In your sideboard, you mean you get to play it? Like, you don't need to meet the stipulation to have it in your deck.
Yes, you're right.
You just
Thank
need
you.
to have that stipulation if you want it in your sideboard, and then want people to access it during the game.
Right. So you can pay 3 mana to pull it from your sideboard and put it in your hand if your deck meets the stipulation. And Yorion's is an interesting one. Your starting deck has to have 20 more cards than the minimum deck size. So for us limited players, that brings us from 40 all the way to 60 cards.
So, spoiler alert, when I did this draft earlier today with this pack, I first picked the Orion. I think even if you're not aiming to companion it, that is correct. A 4/5 flyer for 5 is just real beefy. It's hard to not have some random thing to blink. It is non-land permanent, so you can blink battles with it.
Oh,
which is
true.
a fun little synergy. And otherwise, it's just easy to have, like, I don't know, an Azumi informant or some other random thing that you get a little bit of extra value out of with this thing. I do think that not all the companions are companionable, but Yorion is. It's hard to do if you take him later in a draft, because you kind of need to go into it with the idea of, I need to end up with enough playables. And that can be a little bit tricky if you're, you know, hedging towards certain colors. You're not sure, you might pivot at some point in the draft or something like that. But Yorion is definitely doable. You know, a lot of those commons and uncommons that we weren't super thrilled about, they're fine. Like, it's not a complete tragedy if you end up with the Dwarf Pilot at 5 in your deck.
Yeah.
Especially if it's 1 out of 60 cards in your deck as opposed to 1 out of 40, right? So it's definitely possible to get up to the 60, and it's worth it to have that 4 or 5 that you get to access at any time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't get the companion of Yorion, but I did get to play one, and there are just so many different things that blink effect can do. There's a lot of good ETBs in this format. It takes Realm Breaker's Grasp off of your creatures because you blink them and they come back. And I'm sure there's some other things like the blue one that does it. I think we were talking about it before. Assimilate Essence is it, probably the -X/-O one.
No, that's the
counter spell, right? Gosh, what was it called? I've cast like so many of this stupid card. I don't remember.
No worries.
It takes auras off. This card does a lot, and I'm definitely first picking it pretty hard over anything else in this pack.
Yeah, it's a fairly easy first pick. If it weren't there, then it would be the Raptors. If the Raptors weren't there, it would be the Tangled Skyline, I think. That makes sense to you?
For sure. I think so. Something interesting about Yorion that I kind of like. It's easy to forget. This isn't a blue and white card.
Right.
It's a blue or white card, which means you can play it in your blue X decks, you can play it in your white X decks, or you can play it in your blue white deck. So white red can play this just as easily as blue black, and that is some crazy flexibility.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the flexibility on the companions is quite good.
yeah, so the chances of you being able to cast Yorion are very high going forward in the draft as well. So definitely love it. Try to companion it if you can. Yeah, super duper good. Definitely ripping Yorion right out of this pack. Not even thinking about it.
All right. So now that we've done that and we've talked about a bunch of little things during that crack a pack, let's kind of get to our general format thoughts. So you said that you've done a couple of drafts so far on Arena, and you've done the one here at the Metagaming. How do you feel, like, just in a general sense overall right now?
I am really liking this format. I think it's really cool. I think it is a huge upgrade from what we were doing with Phyrexia, right? I mean, I think all of us were getting really tired of just like, oh, toxic. That's the deck. That's the format. I'm first picking one drops. Like, that's fun. Yeah, we were definitely getting sick of it, and this is just a big breath of fresh air, I think. And there's just a lot of interaction. There's a lot of different things to be doing in the format. I've been really liking it so far. That being said, I'm not performing super well. Like I said, I had a 7-1 deck earlier in the week, but every other deck I played on Arena, I don't think I've gotten more than 2 wins, I think. So it's been a little bit rough. The one I did at the meta, I went 1-2 with a blue-black deck. So it's been a little rough so far, but I think I just have to, like, really sit down, read the cards a little bit more, and,
Now, to be fair, the draft that we did last Sunday was an 11-person draft. We ended up splitting into pods of 5 and 6, which means that each pod sees less cards overall. Your decks are just not going to be as strong. And Nick and I both ended up in the 5-person pod, actually
next to each other. Yeah.
So it's hard to really look at that and take away, oh, that wasn't a great performance or whatever, just because it was a little bit asymmetrical in terms of like how much people got hurt by having fewer people in their pod. But
I can't believe that I was one of 2 people who voted for the 11 pod, man. I thought the 11 would have been better. It's way more cards to see, but democracy, baby. That's what they wanted. And that's what they got. My blue-black deck didn't have any Afara's dispersals, and I'm blaming that on only seeing 5 packs worth of cards each round.
Yeah, I've done somewhere between 12 and 15 drafts at this point. I've done 2 drafts here. I've done 1 other paper draft with some friends, and I've done a ton of arena drafts at this point. I definitely enjoy the format. Like Nick said, it's a nice fresh breath of fresh air after Phyrexia. I do have some qualms with it, and I'm trying to figure out how much of it is me needing to kind of change the way I'm going about the drafts. How much of it is just that Arena is a cursed program that won't give me lands when I need them and will flood me with them when I don't. And how much of it is just, I don't know, other, I guess. Because I found my record is definitely overall positive right now. I'm winning more than 50% of my games. And that's generally a good benchmark for success in a format. But I want to get better than that. And I know that there's some games that I'm losing that I probably could have won if I had approached the draft in a different way. I do find that in terms of speed of the format, it's slower than what we have dealt with recently, right? It's slower than Brothers War, and it's slower than Phyrexia.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, absolutely.
It feels fairly comparable to Dominaria United in terms of speed, but with stronger bombs.
Yeah, definitely agree.
That said, you need to respect the fast decks. The fast decks in this format aren't doing what they did in Phyrexia, where it's like, here's my 1 mana, it's going to be a 3/3, don't you worry about it, followed by my 2 mana 3/3, followed by my 3 mana 4/4 or whatever. Like, it's not doing complete gross curve outs on you. But the curve outs that, especially, it's mostly the white aggressive decks, right? Like, that's the main color that's doing the aggressive stuff. White, blue knights, any of the white backup based stuff. They're doing a combination of putting down flyers and making your blocks really annoying. Bullet Slinger has been, I think, one of the key cards in these sort of strategies. So you put down your dumb little Serpent Blade Assailant and you're like, okay, I'm blocking. I got my Death Toucher. And then they say, actually, no, you're not blocking, and you're not blocking next turn or next turn.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so quick for the snowball effect to become out of control. But at the same time, you need to be ready for the slow decks. Every once in a while, I'll keep a hand. I'll be like, this is a little bit slower, but it's fine. And my opponent will say, okay, you didn't deal with me fast enough. So here's Breach the Multiverse. Oh, I hit my Shieldred Whispering one. That's so funny. And also your best card out of the top 10 of your deck as well.
This feels personal.
Yeah.
Feels like a thing that might have happened to you.
It is a thing that might have happened to me. So it really can go in either direction. I think overall the slower decks are better than the faster decks. The faster decks just don't come together as much. And as a lot of people have found, blue is the best color in the format by a decent amount, and it's a very deep color at common, which just helps make the slow decks better. Again, that all sounds right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a good time when blue is the best color in a format. I mean, I'm a blue player. I mean, it's not my favorite color, but like when I get to bounce stuff back to people's hands, I'm like, yes, this is awesome.
I mean, I remember during the common and uncommon set review, we looked at Invasion of Amonkhet fairly early on, right? The one blue black invasion with 4 counters, I believe, that said each player mills 3 when it enters. Then you draw a card and your opponent discards a card. And we said if this card is good, then this format is sweet, and it's in contention for one of the best uncommons in the entire set.
Yeah, we totally said that, didn't we? That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think that I'm pretty happy overall with the speed of the format. You kind of need that balance, right? I prefer a format be slower rather than faster, but if fast decks aren't a thing, then there's nobody to keep the slow decks kind of honest, right?
True. Yeah, for sure.
Like, there's nothing, if no one's going to pressure me, then there's no reason that I'm not going to play 8 game lands in my deck.
Yeah.
And say, I'm going to start playing on turn 4 or 5. But there are people to make me play Magic. So, land count. You said you've been doing, we were talking a little bit earlier, 16, 17 generally?
Yeah, I think about half of my decks have been at 16 lands, which is definitely not a common thing that I usually do. I'm usually just like, just put 17 lands in and whatever, right? But just with like quite a few land cyclers in your deck and stuff. And even like if you have bombs, some of them can be like, okay, it's a 4-drop. You don't have to play over 16 lands if like your best cards are 4-drops, you know?
Yeah, some things that I've noticed, I actually don't play the land cyclers as often as I thought I was going to, just because, again, you have better options at the top end a lot of the time. And there's other ways to get your mana online that I find to be a little bit more consistent. It's weird, right? Because it used to be that flexibility was such a strong thing in Magic. You want a card that was useful on turn 2 and turn 6, but it's just not the name of the game, I think, anymore. It's not a disaster to put them in your deck. I think they're still quite good overall. They're just not like top of the format like I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I was actually really enthusiastic about seeing all of them back, and I still think they perform like the Alabaster Host Incisor. Like when I play that card, my opponent is not super excited about it, and I am. You know, a lot of removal in this format, so it's not hard to get it off the board and they get their stuff back. But like, you know, at least I tried, right?
But I found that having a lot of other ways to get basics, skittering surveyors especially, if you end up with 1 or 2 surveyors, you can generally cut a land because they're going to find you the lands that you need. And in paper, I've still mostly been playing 17 land decks, but Arena cheats. Arena does this weird smoothing thing where it gets a couple of opening hands behind the scenes and says, oh, this one's a little bit better. So it's harder to end up with a opening hand in Arena that's just completely mana screwed, right? Like, you basically never see 0 land hands in Arena, and you rarely see 1 land hands. You almost always see 2 and up. So you can kind of get away with playing less lands in Arena because you're going to have enough in your opener. So I thought that, because I've been doing the 16 lands thing on Brothers War and Phyrexia a lot in Arena, and I thought it was just like, oh, these are fast formats. I shouldn't be playing as many lands. I'm playing these fast decks. I think just Arena smoothing has a lot to do with it as well.
I see. Okay. Yeah, all right. That's good to know. I didn't know that Arena actually did smooth you out like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Doesn't feel like it for me, but I think you're right. I've rarely ever seen a hand with, or never have seen one with less than 2 lands.
Now, will it have the right colors is a complete other
Yeah,
question,
no, that's the
right?
issue I've been having.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's talk about the bomminess of the format. I think we've talked about it a little bit already, but like, so we said, right, it's very bomby. There's a lot of just like nasty cards that your opponent plays it, you groan, and like hopefully you can do something about it, but probably not. You know? And not probably not. There's a lot of removal in this format, but
yeah, there's a lot of removal, and there's some playable counter spells in blue, which helps a lot. And it's kind of balanced by the fact, like, yeah, maybe your opponent has 3 or 4 bombs, but you usually also have 3 or 4 bombs. It's hard to not end up with a couple of good rares in your deck. I have done it before.
Yeah, me too.
But it's not common for that to happen, for sure. That said, I don't know if it necessarily makes the format worse. Like, people talk about, like, is this a Prince format or a Pauper format? And this does feel like a Prince format, but it's a Prince format where everybody's a Prince. So,
yeah.
like, it can occasionally lead to games where you didn't actually have any real agency, where your decisions before turn 5 or 6 or 7 didn't matter because the card came down, and it's like, oh, this is...
Because they cast Sunfall, and it's just like,
they cast Sunfall, or Invasion of Fiora has gotten me more times than I'd like to admit. I haven't actually played against a Sunfall, I don't think.
Me neither.
I'm thinking about it.
Me neither.
Not sure how I've managed that, but Invasion of Fiora has absolutely screwed me up a couple of times. Breach of the Multiverse has killed me. There's a lot of just random cards that can do it.
Yeah, I luckily have not been hit by either of those yet, but then again, I've done much less drafting than you so far, so I'm sure it will happen tonight when I go home and I'm playing the deck I just drafted up. But that being said, so I know sometimes a format can get exhausting with like, oh, everything's a bomb, this stinks. How are you feeling about it in terms of like that idea, this format?
It definitely can be a little bit overbearing, like I said, at times. But for the most part, I do feel like the answers are good enough, or even though I'm seeing bombs on a regular basis, they're not completely upending all of my games. So I would say that, I mean, we're still fairly early in the format, right? We're like, what, 2-3 weeks in?
Yeah.
To drafting. So, I mean, I'm still having enough fun where I'm playing it on a regular basis. So, I wouldn't have gotten this many drafts in if I wasn't having a good enough time, right?
No, seriously, me too. Do you want to know? You want to know something crazy?
Yeah.
I was talking to my girlfriend today, and I had like 20-25 minutes before I showed up here. I was late, not because of this, I promise. My friends are streaming at home and I needed to help them. I promise. Like, I was literally heading out the door and my friend called me. I swear, Devin, I swear. But so we finished watching an episode of TV with our dinner, and I just pulled out my laptop and I was like, all right, I'm gonna draft a deck real quick, get eyes on some cards before I show up. And she was like, you have a problem right now. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're hyperfixating on Magic right now. I was like, why would you say that? And she's like, you're treating it like a smoke break. Like, you have a second before your next thing, so you're gonna go, instead of smoke a cigarette out back, you do a draft. I'm like, yeah, I guess. Like, it was a pretty honest call out. I sat there for like 5 minutes just like looking forward while I'm picking like decent black cards. I'm like, you are so right. And that feels bad. But, it's a testament to the format. It's got me pretty hooked.
Yeah.
So
I will say one thing that also gets me with this format. There's been a lot of talk about how good synergy is versus how important just raw power on your cards is, how good cards are individually. The last couple of sets, I would argue, were very synergy based, right? Like, a good deck in Phyrexia, All Will Be One, was very linear, but it was like, these are all the toxic cards that are more than the sum of their parts when put together in a deck. And it's not like this deck or this format's completely devoid of synergy, but again, this is a symptom of how many bombs are in the set. It's more important generally that you just play individually strong cards. And so certain themes don't come up as often, I feel like. Like, you could say, like, yeah, the blue-red deck is definitely a Convoke deck, but you're not saying, like, I won the game because I convoked you out or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? The blue-black mill thing, I feel like, just isn't there. which is
No.
wild because blue-black is still probably one of the best color combinations.
Mm-hmm.
It's just blue-black is a control thing. You don't care about getting them to the 8-card threshold in their graveyard generally.
If you do, it like might help like a couple of your cards, but it's not like a huge deal.
Yeah. And I guess we'll segue a little bit into the color combos so far. So I did include in front of us, which you people can't see, just some stats from 17 Lands. If you haven't heard of that website, it's just a good way to get stats for what people are playing in Limited, how well people are doing with those things in Limited, so on and so forth. So Azorius, white, blue, has been pretty successful. Just to give you a little bit of context, Nick.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
just see a bunch
well,
of numbers. Talk to me, buddy.
Yeah. So generally, the way 17 Lands works is that people opt into it and then like it reads their data off of Arena.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. And because the people that are opting into this are generally a little bit better than the average player, that means like all these percentages you're seeing for win rates are above 50% by a decent amount.
Yeah.
Because they're slightly better players than average. That said, just because it's above 50% doesn't mean that's particularly good. Like, for example, let's say the white-black deck, or Zav, has like a 53.1% win rate based on the information that we have right now. That's not really a great number, all things considered. I personally haven't had a whole lot of success with white-black, and if I did, it's definitely not off of the whole like Phyrexian Tribal thing, unless I end up with a couple of the good rares.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a couple of those decks go off, but otherwise it's just like I got good white and black cards and I decided to put them together in a deck. A big part of that is also the white black deck I don't think wants to be that aggressive generally. You can end up with this like weird white black knights kind of thing, but it's not common. And because white is so much more of an aggressive color in this format, that means that the cards just don't really mesh together. Great. But kind of going back to Azorius. Now, Nick, are you able to read that percentage?
No.
Okay.
It is completely covered by the camera.
Dang. I
Can
guess
you?
we'll never know. No, not at all. I guess we'll never know what the win percentage on Azorius is.
There we go. We got it.
58.3%.
That's
That's a high number.
That's high.
That's good. So blue-white decks, obviously the theme that they wanted is Knights, right? But that doesn't mean that Knights is the only thing that Azorius is doing in this format. In fact, I would argue that the Knights theme is often not like the forefront of the blue-white deck. It does have the good aggressive elements. Sometimes it is just playing Bola Slingers and backing it up with your blue cards. But there's also a little bit of a Convoke and Spell Slingy element to it. Wrath being on the uncommon sheet for the Multiverse Legends helps with that a decent bit. In general, a lot of the blue decks can be called Convoke decks just because they all do some amount of flooding the board and then spamming Meeting of Minds and stuff like that.
Yep.
But Dimir ends up being somewhat similar because, again, it is mostly not doing that mill thing. It's just kind of doing a nice controlling strategy. Play as many invasions of Amonkhet as you can. That, I believe, is the 2-color combo that currently has the highest win rate at 58.5%. I know you said you played a Dimir deck on Sunday at the draft, but you didn't have a lot of success with that because we just didn't have enough cards in our pool to really justify it.
Yeah, not a ton. I did have Rona, which was hype. When Rona got going, obviously it was like, how can I be stopped right now? This is crazy.
Rona's great.
But the deck played out just fine. My opponents just like we were saying before, just flew over my head entirely. Like both games I lost, it was just like, oh, over.
Rakdos Black Red is at 54.2, which isn't great, but I will say that some of my best success in this format actually has been with like the real sacrifice deck. Have you played with or against it at all?
I kind of played it at pre-release, which means I just like had black red cards and 3 of them had sacrifice synergy.
Okay.
So I haven't really played against it. No.
So the last deck that I 7x'd with, I would think it was a 7-2 because it's always a 7-2 in this format, was a black red deck with only 1 rare. It was Invasion of Tarkir, which is a good rare.
That is a good rare.
That's a 2-mana red invasion that deals 2 damage to any target. It's 2+2 for each dragon in your hand, which is usually 0. And then it flips into a 4/4 flyer that deals 2 to any target when it attacks. I've flipped it a couple of times and I'm just like, that preening champion's gone.
Yeah.
And that preening champion's gone.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And that thing on the ground's gone. Get that incubator token out of here. It's wonderful. But this black-red deck that I played had 3 of the 1 black-red Signpost uncommon.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a
it
lot.
had that. It had a Yuri, or Jury, whatever her name is, the Rakdos uncommon from the multiverse sheet, and it had 9 different cards that could hit my opponent directly in the face. 2 Stoke the Flames, an Invasion of Volgrotha, an Invasion of Regatha, just a ton of reach that it could do out of absolutely nowhere. I feel like the black-red deck, you need to see that the signs are there that you're supposed to be in that deck. And
Yeah.
I did not start that draft thinking I'm going to be in the black-red deck. I took an Invasion of Tarkir, then some, I think, Deadly Derision, then an Invasion of Alara.
Okay, I'm good.
I was like, it's early enough where I can spec on this. There was nothing else crazy in the pack, and it was like, okay, I'll try it. We'll see if the pieces come together. And it became obvious, like, I wheeled one of the Signpost uncommons and the Yuri, and I was like, I'm supposed to be in black-red.
Yeah. It's a sign.
That said, it's hard for that deck to come together, and I don't think you're supposed to spec into it too early.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Have you done a lot of grueling?
No, and you know what? I haven't even seen an opponent do a bunch of grueling.
One of my first decks in draft in this format was actually a Gruul deck that went 7-1, I believe.
There you go.
That was my other 7 win that I have right now. And it just played a bunch of the decent ramp stuff. It played Rampaging Geoderms, the Signpost uncommon, the 3/3 trample haste boy that I love. And I played a Kogla and Yadaro. And
There you
Kogla and
go.
Yadaro
Well,
is
that's
a good card.
Yeah, that's a great reason to be in Gruul. Did you first pick that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, that card is sweet.
Yeah.
I'd first pick that any day of the week.
That said, Gruul's win rate is also not fantastic, 54.5%, which is on the lower end considering what else we're seeing here. I don't think the battles theme is particularly real because, again, a lot of the battles in this format are just like fine to good, right? Like they're already cards that you want to play without having to do this like I am the battle deck kind of thing.
Right.
You don't need your bonuses for playing them. The Rampaging Geoderm is still just a good card. But again, it's one of these aggressive decks that doesn't have white, which I think is part of the issue. Like green's not super aggressive in this format,
No,
so it
it's
doesn't
not.
add a ton. Red's not that deep a color. So it's harder for the red-green to come together. We already talked about Orzhov a bit. Golgari.
Well, you just gonna skip Selesnya like that? You going down the line?
Yeah, I'm going to skip. We don't talk about... Yeah, let's just
That's my favorite color combo, man.
Okay.
Not necessarily in this format, but in general.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, Selesnya is at a 55.3, which is actually higher than I thought it was.
Yeah, right.
I feel like... So I don't think I've ended up in straight green-white. I've done it with splashes a couple of times because I have no self-control. That said, I think that if you end up in green-white, it's not supposed to be this full 1/1 counters kind of deal.
No, it's not.
But you are still an aggressive deck with backup. Again, the problem just being that green doesn't add a whole lot to that, and it's a little bit less deep than what the slower decks in the format are able to do.
Right. Yeah, I ended up in Selesnya for my first arena draft actually, and I was in incubators actually. I had a bunch of the 3-mana 2/2 flyers that flip the incubators. So I'd
Yeah.
play that on 3 and then a converter beast on 4, flip my incubator into a 5/5. Or I'd play the I forget his name, the guy who makes incubators have an extra 1/1 counter when they flip. The 2-mana guy, Norn's Inquisitor.
Yeah,
Is
that
it?
card's sweet.
So go that on 2. On 3, you play whatever it is, the flying guy we were just
Attentive
talking about.
Skywarden, I believe is his
That's
name.
it. You're so good at this, man.
you.
And then on 4, play the converter beast, and I flip into a 6/6. Like that happened a few times, and it was very good. Tangled Skylines, and I think, well, actually, never mind. All the enchantments that make incubate tokens are pretty good. But yeah, just like playing those alongside like random things to just say, yeah, incubate whenever. Like it's gonna be pretty decent.
Yeah.
It didn't perform super well. My deck wasn't like fantastic or anything, but it had draws where it was just like, I'm gonna destroy you with like a 2/6/6 incubators, you know?
Yeah. That said, let's talk about a better color combination, Golgari.
Damn. You really roasted me here, man.
I respect Selesnya, but like I'm a black player at heart.
Yeah, I
And
got
Golgari is a black deck that is actually all of the other colors too, because it's got green in it. And that lets me
Yeah.
live out my bad draft habits.
I'm
I
just
play all the
splashing
colors.
anything.
Yeah, it's actually got a 55.8% win rate, which is on the higher end. I don't know. I mean, like, green black can kind of go in two different directions. It can do the whole I'm going to play incubators and Phyrexians thing. It's a little bit better at that than like the white black deck is, I think. But at the same time, because it's a green X deck, there is like a real 4-color deck and there is a real 5-color deck in this format. I think that they're tougher to get into than people give them credit for, because you still need to be able to defend yourself early, and they're not necessarily great at that. But black green is one of the better ways I found to get into like some of the multicolor splashy decks. I've definitely enjoyed playing Golgari.
Yeah, I've got one a Golgari deck. You watch me play with it a little bit. Queued up on Arena right now. I'm 1-1 with it, and it's splashing one card. It's Galta and Maverin, and I have no fixing in that except Skittering Surveyor. So I'm playing 3 planes.
Yeesh.
It's really rough, but Golgari definitely seems pretty good. I'm surprised the win rate isn't a little bit higher there. I thought black might carry it a little bit more, but. What about Simic? I haven't really seen too many Simic players.
So I think the Simic I'm going to play Transformed Permanence Tribal deck is a lie. That said, it still has a 56.2% win rate according to 17 lands. And that's because I think Simic is also kind of sneakily the I'm going to play whatever cards I want deck. Again, it's a blue deck, so it just has good stuff at common. Mutagen Connoisseurs are okay, even if they're like 0/5s or 1/5s, and I've seen them get bigger than that. But that said, again, a lot of the transform stuff is already fairly like high pick. It's kind of the same thing as the battles, right?
Mm-hmm.
The battles deck in green red, where it's hard to build around a theme if that theme is something that every deck already wants. Let's talk about Is It Convoke, which again we kind of just talked about this, where it's a little bit of a Convoke thing, but it's a blue deck, so it kind of just gets to play a lot of the good cards. 55.1%, which I'm actually surprised isn't higher. I think Is It is sweet in this format. I play against it all the time. I'm routinely frustrated when my opponent suddenly has 9 mana on turn 3 somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you need to prioritize cards that make multiple bodies, especially. So Preening Champions, which you're going to be fighting everybody at the table for, and Rouse Reinforcements, the 1 in a red sorcery that makes 2 elementals. But also just like every 1 and 2 drop you can play is probably fine in the blue-red deck. And in any of the blue Convoke decks, to be perfectly honest. Like if you're in the blue-black control deck that's playing a bunch of Convoke stuff, you play an Ichor Drinker in that, the 1/1 lifelink.
I think you just kind of play that one anyway. The card's pretty good.
Yeah, Omen Hawker, the dumb little mana dork for activated abilities specifically. Yep. Even if you don't have activated abilities to activate with that mana, it taps for Convoke mana just fine. So that deck I have found to be pretty good. I've played it here at the meta once and had pretty good success with it. And then the last color combination, Boros, sitting at a little 54.7% win rate. People have been talking about Boros not being especially good. I think that deck, if you're going to play the whole backup theme, really needs a couple of those Mirror Shield hoplites.
Yes.
The uncommon.
Yes, it does.
And otherwise, you're kind of just doing the same old, like, this is a white deck that wants the Bolas Sling.
Yeah.
But again, with red being one of the weaker colors to supplement that with. Now, these numbers that I have up here, just talking about the win rates for splashing, we're not going to go through all of them. In fact, we're going to go through none of them. This is just kind of give us a general idea that I think that splashing is harder in this format than people give it credit for. Or maybe that I give it credit for.
Yeah.
What we see when we look at 17 lands is that basically all of the win rates for 2 colors plus a splash are lower than their base rates. I think literally all of them are. Except for maybe like Golgari and Simic. Again, the green X decks that want to splash a bit to begin with.
Simic's is down. I think Golgari is almost the same or like a little up.
Consistency in mana is really important in this format.
I've learned that. I haven't learned it. I keep doing it.
I keep doing it too. One thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the bombs do tend to have double color pips. So it's not free. Like you were just talking about the Galta in your deck right now. Like that's a real deck building concession that you've made to play it. Is it worth it? I'm not 100% certain because I keep thinking it's worth it for cards and then not being able to do it. I was telling Nick the other day I had this Abzan deck that had decent fixing, like 3 duels, a Skittering Surveyor, whatever, and it had a Shieldred and an Elishnorn, and then like a Karuga and a Goreclaw.
Yeah, that thing was that
Like
was a
it had
deck,
just
man.
like all these absurd rares, and all 3 games that I lost, I just couldn't get the double pips I needed for one of them.
Yeah, it's that definitely rough. Man, you should have played more lands. Should go up to 18. No, definitely not. I'm surprised you weren't able to get there with the Skittering Surveyors. But you know, that's just how it goes sometimes. Magic, you know, for as good as the mana system is, sometimes it's just gonna make you feel like an idiot. Or maybe we're the idiots for not respecting it.
Yeah.
You know? But no, I can't help splashing either. If that deck that I'm talking about had 1 Blighted Burgeoning, Galta would be totally fine to splash. Like, no question, but it doesn't. So
yeah, one thing that I noticed, and this is another thing we were talking about before, I guess notice isn't the correct word for this because a friend told me this. I was thinking about how a lot of commons, like I won't see wheel ever in this format, even if the color is open. And it turns out that there's just 20 more commons in this set than the previous. So I think that just means that there's more different commons in rotation.
That's so strange.
And because a lot of your pack is made up of rares and uncommons and stuff, that means that certain commons are just going to be harder to come by.
I didn't know that. That's so weird.
It is weird, but something to keep in mind.
Definitely. Yeah, there's been a few drafts where I'm like, oh, I should be able to find a portent tracker, no problem. And they're just not there. It's like, okay, well, never mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
I had a draft yesterday, I believe, where I saw a meeting of minds at pack 1, pick 3. And I said, I don't need that right now. I will find one later. And no, I did not find one later. I think card advantage is super important in this format too. So like meeting of minds is probably something you're supposed to prioritize a little bit higher than maybe I do. Though it's also tough to say, right? Because like one of the things that I've always found with newer players is that they super overvalue the phrase draw a card. So, or draw 2 cards in this case. So it's possible it's one of those kind of cards that gets picked up at a higher rate than it's supposed to be. And I just kind of have to deal with it at where I am on the arena ladders right now.
Very possible. Yeah, we are on very different spots on the arena ladder, so it's a little, we're playing honestly much different games.
Yeah.
Your decks always look way better than mine though. It's because all these these are passing me garbage.
I don't think you can call them these, Nick.
Oh my god, Devin, bleep that out.
But yeah, it's been an interesting experience drafting this much of the set. Because while I do draft a lot, I don't usually like I jammed 3 drafts today.
Wow.
Nick. That's a lot of drafting.
I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. It's Thursday, Steven. Go to work. Like what?
You did not need to call me out on that.
Dude, if you like don't have a job, I didn't know that.
I don't
was
have
just
a job
kidding.
right now.
Oh no, I didn't know. Oh, that's so mean. I'm so sorry. Well, I do have a job and I hate it. Oh, that sucks. I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
But dude, I did that the other day. I was off on Monday and my girlfriend had to work, so I was like, well, I know what time it is. And I did 3 drafts. Same exact thing. And I honestly I think the last time I did this many drafts, I think I'm up to maybe 8 drafts now. I think the last time I've done this many was like, gosh, Ravnica Allegiance, which was a while ago at this point, because I fell out of it with COVID and stuff because I wasn't really playing Arena. So I wasn't really playing Magic all that much at that time. I kind of at Dominaria United started coming to the shop and drafting more.
Right.
Ravnica Allegiance, I grinded. I was there every week. I went to GP Jersey and just jam drafts until until they forced me out of the building. So I've been drafting this set quite a lot, which I think is a good sign.
Yeah. We're close to wrapping it up. Let's talk about some more, like, I guess, specific cards that you found have been overrated or underrated. We've already touched on a bunch of them. But is there anything off the top of your head that you've played with where you've been like, wow, now that I've drafted a bunch of times, it's just not really where I want to be? Or the opposite?
Yeah, honestly, the land cyclers have been a big talking point. Like at the beginning of the format, I was playing decks with like 3 or 4 of them in there. I was like, this just smooths out my lands, and then if we draw one on turn 6, we just get to play it, and that's cool. I've been going from playing like 3+ of those down to like maybe one. And that's been pretty weird. So I think maybe they're not overrated overall, but I was overrating those. I think that's my big one. I think I called out. No, you know what? I think I was gonna do it again. Iara. She's rated. That card's awesome. That card's cracked. What about you?
I mean, in terms of rares and mythics, I mean, I know we didn't do like a full set review for this, but I don't feel like anything is completely off. In terms of commons and uncommons, because ours are still what you're seeing the most, right? I think Captive Weird is one that has performed better than I thought it was going to.
Yeah, me too. I like that one a
3
lot.
for 1 is a single blue mana. It's got Defender. You get to flip it for 3 and a Phyrexian red, I believe. Becomes a 3/3 without Defender, and it lets you exile the top card of your library when it flips. You may play it until your next turn.
Yeah, no, that card, I had 2 of them in my deck the other day. Played really well. I like that card a lot. Because whatever, it just sits there early and blocks, and then when it's game time, either you need to draw a card or you want to start getting in with a 3/3, or you need to block with a 3/3. There it is.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the random blue stuff ended up being better than I thought it was going to be. It took me a bit to get on board with Afar's Dismissal, and I think that's just because I'm like against unsummons on principle generally. But it's just so efficient at getting problems off the board.
It's so good.
And it doesn't technically replace itself, but if it bins a bunch of cards you didn't want to draw, then you're fine with it, right? So
yeah. No, that card is super sweet. I actually had such a rough interaction with that card the other day. I cast it, right? Yes, okay, here's how it went. I cast it on one of our the people who comes to the shop, Sean. I cast it on him. I surveilled 2 cards. I saw a Halo Forager and another, like, a removal piece. And I was like, oh, wow, this is going to bail me out. That's awesome. And then he did some combat tricks where I was forced to block, and the only blocker I could block with was Flitting Gorillas. So I was like, oh, well, I got a block there. And then I was like, I mill 2 cards. And then I looked at the 2 cards that I had just surveilled to the top, and I was like, uh-oh. Oh no.
Yeah.
Like it turned out I definitely had to block there. So it was like I couldn't help it, but it just felt so bad because honestly I had forgotten that I had even surveilled them because we were in like a crazy board state. So then when I saw them again, I was like, wait a minute. Oh no. But yeah, as far as Dispersal, that started the chain of all those events. As far as Dispersal is definitely a very good card in the format. And anytime my blue deck doesn't have one, I'm like, I messed up.
I will say I had a similar experience actually at the last draft here, where my opponent in round 3 played the Afar's Dispersal, looked at the top 2, and was like, "Oh, I'm definitely keeping that on top." And like he puts them down, and I'm like, "Okay, no, you're not." And I played Unseal the Necropolis immediately.
Oh,
I'm like, "No, you're putting them in the graveyard." Actually,
oh, you like those? That's too bad. That's so brutal. That's so funny.
It was. I was gonna play it on his end step anyway. He just kind of gave me the setup for the funny SmackDown, so I had to take it.
Oh, that's awesome for sure. I like that a lot. That's so mean. Just to make a note of it too, like, oh, you remember those cards that you saw and loved? They're gone now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that card a lot, Unsealed Necropolis. Definitely playing better than I thought it was gonna.
Yeah, again, it's one of those formats where like the random black spell that buys back a couple of creatures just really puts in the work.
Yeah. Any other overrated or underrated cards you can think of right now?
Not really.
No, me neither. I had a couple in mind, but classically, as I do, I forgot. So maybe I'll say them during like the last segment of the show if I just remember. But yeah, overall, man, I mean, I think we've said it enough. This format's really, really fun. There's a lot to do, and most of it is reasonable. Like, there isn't a deck really where it's like, oh, I drafted this deck, this is going to be cool, and it's just terrible.
Honestly, thank God, because I think we're going to have to draft this set for a while. So at least they gave us a good one for like the large amount of time before the next standard set, right?
Yeah, well, so what's the deal, right? Is the summer set is the Lord of the Rings set?
Yeah, so March of the Machine Aftermath is going to come out very soon after this episode. Probably like the day this episode comes up, if I had to take a guess. Don't quote me on that. But that's not a limited set. That is its own beast, and so it's not going to really matter for what we do here. Though full disclosure, I am going to try to figure out a way to make it a limited playable thing.
Oh boy.
Just because I want to try it. I think it would be funny. But the next thing is going to be the Lord of the Rings set, which I believe is in June.
And that's a modern legal set, right?
That's a modern legal set, but it is going to be draftable. It has its own pre-release. It has its own launch weekend. And so I don't think we're supposed to just switch over to drafting it every week.
No, probably not.
But it will give us a little bit of a shake-up. Again, I'm just thankful that we have a good set that we're sticking with for a while.
Me too.
Last year, the set we were stuck with for a long time was Streets in Yucatana. And
Tough.
that wasn't nearly deep enough to justify having months on end of it.
Yeah. I think I figured out how to do the Aftermath draft. So it's kind of like you do March of the Machine first. I guess you'd open the Aftermath pack first. You Rochester a pack of Aftermath. Or maybe two. You know Rochester draft, yeah?
I'm aware of it.
Okay. You do that first, get some of those cards, and then you just do a regular draft.
Why don't you explain what Rochester draft
is?
is?
Oh,
Real quick for
totally.
our
Of
viewers?
course. Why would you know what that means? It's so stupid. I really like Rochester draft, and I want to do a full one day. So how it works is you pretty much you open the pack and you lay it out face up on the table, and then everyone goes around and face up picks a card and puts it like in their pile, so everyone kind of knows what you're drafting and stuff. It's definitely a very different beast, and it takes a really long time.
So the tough thing with Aftermath boosters is that they only have 5 cards in them.
Oh, open 3 of them and lay them out on the table. Then I don't know.
They also cost the same as normal packs.
I am getting more and more disappointed with that set. With everything you tell me, what else are you going to tell me? That it leaked 2 weeks early and they sent the Pinkertons to the guy's house?
Whoa, you're getting too topical, Nick.
So tough, man. Yeah, well, I'm excited for the Lord of the Rings, but I will be okay drafting this for a while.
Yeah, March of the Machine's been fun, so we'll keep on keeping on with it. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this one up, Nick?
I don't think so. Thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate you all so much. I think we were maybe going to start doing it in this episode and we forgot, but like if you have any questions for us to answer, leave them in the comments down below. We'd love to start answering some fan questions for you guys.
All right, guys, it's been fun. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.